My name is Edrin. I'm past 30 now, and for most of my life, I was a house restorer in the southern border town of Eldridge. It wasn't glamorous work, patching roofs, reinforcing foundations, turning crumbling shacks into something livable for folks who couldn't afford better. But it kept me steady, gave me purpose. That was before everything fell apart. Nearly a year ago, my mother passed away from a wasting illness that no healer in town could cure. She was the anchor in my life, the one who taught me how to swing a hammer and read the grain of wood. Watching her fade was like watching the world dim. After she was gone, the emptiness hit hard. I tried to drown it in cheap ale from the taverns, but that only made things worse. My small shop went under. Customers dried up when I started missing deadlines, buried in grief. The landlord took back my rented home when I couldn't pay. Friends? They drifted away, uncomfortable with my silence and my stares into nothing. I was left with nothing but echoes and regrets. All I had left was 15 gold coins, scraped together from selling my tools and what little furniture remained. It wasn't much, but in a moment of desperation, I used it all to buy a deed to an abandoned house on the edge of the White Forest. The forest was a wild, misty expanse marking the border between human lands and orc territories. A place of ancient trees, whispered legends of spirits, and beasts that could swallow a man whole. The house had been empty for years, forsaken after some old raid during the border skirmishes. No one wanted it. Rumors said it was cursed, haunted by the ghosts of those lost in the wars, but to me, it was a chance. A quiet spot far from the noise of town where I could rebuild something, maybe even myself. I imagined fixing it up, turning it into a real home, away from pitying eyes and the constant reminder of what I'd lost. 6 weeks after signing the papers, I set out on an old, sway-backed horse I'd bartered for with my last few coppers. The journey north took days through rolling hills that gave way to denser woods. My mind was a tangle of doubt and fragile hope. What if the house was beyond repair? What if the forest's dangers, wild animals, wandering orc bands, or worse, proved too much? I pushed the thoughts down, focusing on the rhythm of hooves on the dirt path. The air grew cooler, laced with the scent of pine and damp earth as I neared the forest's rim. Finally, I turned onto the overgrown trail leading to my new property. Tall grasses whipped at my legs and the trees closed in like silent guardians. My heart quickened with a mix of anticipation and fear. Then, as the house came into view, a squat, weathered structure with sagging eaves and moss-covered walls, I froze. Smoke was rising from the chimney. It curled lazily into the gray sky, thin and gray against the backdrop of the forest. My pulse thundered in my ears, loud enough to drown out the rustle of leaves. The horse snorted uneasily, stamping a hoof. I dismounted slowly, my legs unsteady as if the ground had shifted. This place was supposed to be abandoned, forsaken for years. Who could be inside? Squatters, thieves hiding from the law, or worse, orc refugees driven south by clan wars taking shelter in what they thought was empty? A chill ran down my spine, not just from the wind. The border was uneasy. Humans and orcs had clashed for generations, and though no full war raged now, old grudges lingered. Stories of orc raids, brutal, green-skinned warriors pillaging villages, filled tavern tales. But I wasn't armed for a fight. All I had was a simple dagger at my belt, more for cutting rope than combat. Tying the horse to a low branch, I approached quietly, my boots crunching on fallen leaves. The door was weathered oak, half rotted at the hinges, but it looked like someone had tried to brace it recently. I hesitated, hand hovering over the latch. Inside I could smell it now, wood smoke mixed with something savory, like stew simmering. My stomach twisted, hunger and nerves warred within me. With a deep breath, I pushed the door open. It creaked loudly, protesting on rusted hinges. The interior was dim, lit by the glow of a fire in the hearth. The floor, once likely covered in dust and debris, had been swept clean. Windows that should have been shattered were patched with stretched animal hides, letting in filtered light. The air was warm, almost welcoming, a stark contrast to the chill outside, and there by the fire were not one but two orc women. They stood abruptly as I entered, their eyes wide with alarm. They were tall, each easily a head above me, with lean muscular builds honed by hardship. Their skin was a deep green gray like moss on ancient stones, and their hair was silver-tinged, tied back in practical braids. Tusks protruded slightly from their lower jaws, and their golden eyes reflected the firelight with a mix of fear and defiance. They raised their hands slowly, palms out, as if expecting me to shout for guards or villagers. For a moment, time hung suspended. My mind raced. Intruders, yes, but they didn't look like threats. No weapons drawn, no snarls. Then, from a wicker basket near the hearth, a small wild rabbit poked its head out, its nose twitching curiously. The absurdity of it broke the tension slightly. The tiny creature in this unexpected scene, the one with shorter hair, Aru, I'd learn later, spoke first, her voice trembling but steady, laced with an orcish accent that rolled the words roughly. "Please, don't report us. We only need shelter for the winter. We'll leave right away if you want." I stood there, stunned. These weren't marauders or thieves. They were just like me, cast adrift by life's cruelties, seeking refuge in a forgotten corner of the world. The realization hit me like a hammer to wood. I could drive them out, claim what was mine by deed, but looking at their weary faces, the patched-together life they'd scraped in my absence, something shifted inside me. "Sit down," I said finally, my voice softer than I'd intended. "I don't have much, but the fire's warm." And just like that, in that single decision, 3 strangers began a winter unlike any other. Not bound by blood, but by the simple choice not to slam the door shut. That first night blurred into a haze of exhaustion and unexpected warmth. I stoked the fire higher, its crackling flames casting flickering shadows across the room. The 2 orc women sat cautiously on the rough-hewn benches I'd spotted near the hearth, benches that hadn't been there in the deed's description, probably scavenged from the forest. I fetched a pot from my saddlebags, boiled some water over the flames, and poured 3 steaming bowls. It wasn't much, just plain hot water to chase away the chill, but it was something to break the silence. Up close, they were even more imposing. Their skin was a deep green gray like weathered slate from the northern quarries, marked here and there with faint scars that spoke of hard lives. Their eyes were a striking amber gold, glowing faintly in the firelight, and their builds were solid, muscled from what must have been years of labor or survival. The one with the shorter hair cropped close to her scalp in a practical style seemed the bolder of the 2. She held her posture straight, tusks glinting slightly as she spoke. The other, with hair tied in a loose braid down her back, was quieter, her movements more deliberate, almost gentle despite her size. They were twins, I realized, though subtle differences. A scar on one's brow, a softer tilt to the other's head, set them apart. They couldn't have been much younger than me, perhaps 25, but their eyes held the weight of more years than that. "I'm Edrin," I said, handing them the bowls. My voice sounded rough, unused to conversation after weeks alone on the road. "And you are?" The shorter-haired one glanced at her sister before answering. "Aru," she said, her accent thick with the rolling consonants of Orcish tongues. She nodded to the other. "This is Willa, my sister." Willa took the bowl with a nod, her fingers wrapping around it carefully, as if afraid to break it. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice softer, less edged. We sat in awkward quiet for a moment, the fire popping and hissing. The rabbit in the basket rustled again, nibbling at some greens they'd probably foraged. It was a small thing, that creature, fluffy, wild-eyed, but it eased the tension, reminding me that life persisted even in ruins like this. I sipped my water, feeling the heat spread through my chest, and decided to ask the question burning in my mind. "How did you end up here?" I said, keeping my tone neutral. No accusation, just curiosity. They exchanged a look, the kind only siblings share, full of unspoken understanding. Aru set her bowl down, staring into the flames as if drawing strength from them. "We come from the far mountains," she began, her words deliberate. "Village called Stonehold. Orc clan. Strong once. Mother died young. Sickness took her when we were small. Father, he went north to the silver mines. Humans run them, promise work, but orcs go in and don't come out. We waited years. He never returned." I nodded slowly, picturing those harsh peaks I'd heard of in border tales, jagged, snow-capped ranges where orc clans eked out lives amid rock and ice. The mines were infamous. Human lords exploited orc labor for the deep veins, and accidents, or worse, were common. "Who raised you then?" "The clan. Willa chimed in quietly, her eyes fixed on her hands. "They took us in like their own. Taught us letters from old scrolls, how to mend clothes, hunt with bow and snare. Aru was always the fighter, learned to wield an axe like it was part of her arm. I handled the quieter things, cooking, tallying supplies for the hunts." Aru grunted in agreement, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Life was hard, but good. We had kin, purpose. Then the plague came." Her voice darkened, the fire reflecting in her eyes like embers of memory. 2 winters ago. Swept through Stonehold like wildfire. Half the village gone in weeks, coughing blood, fever that burned hotter than any forge. The elders died first, then the young. We buried so many, our friends, our mentors. The clan shattered, survivors scattered, fleeing to other holds or south, away from the cold. Willa's hand tightened on her bowl. We tried to stay, but there was nothing left. No food stores, no protection. We headed south, to human lands. Thought we'd find work. Strong backs like ours are useful. Hunted game for taverns, helped build walls in border villages, cooked in inns where owners didn't mind green skin. But it wasn't easy, Aru continued, her jaw clenching. Humans, many fear us, call us savages, even when we work twice as hard. One innkeeper in Riverton, he promised fair pay but tricked us. Said we owed him for damages we never caused. Gave false debts to the guards, called us thieves. We ran before they could chain us, wandered for months taking odd jobs, sleeping in barns or under stars, heard about this house. Abandoned, cursed, they said. No one comes near because of ghost stories from the old wars. Perfect hiding for 2 orcs with nowhere else. I listened, the words sinking in like rain on parched soil. Their story mirrored mine in ways I hadn't expected. Loss of family, betrayal by those who should have helped, the endless drift toward isolation. I thought of my mother, wasting away in that cramped room in Eldridge, her hands too weak to hold mine at the end. The shop closing, doors barred by creditors. The friends who stopped coming around, uncomfortable with my grief. I know that pain, I said quietly, surprising myself. Losing everything. Thinking if you just hold on to the past, tight enough the hurt will fade. But it doesn't. You have to build something new, or it swallows you. Aru met my gaze, her golden eyes steady. You speak truth, human. Better to share shelter with strangers than freeze alone in the woods. Willa adjusted Aru's worn cloak, a small gesture of care that spoke volumes, the unbreakable bond between them forged in shared hardship. We talked a little more, the fire dying to embers, until weariness claimed us. I offered them the corner with the basket, spreading my own cloak on the floor near the hearth. That night, for the first time in months, sleep came easily. The crackle of dying flames, the steady breaths of Aru and Willa, even the soft gnawing of the rabbit in its nook. It all wove into a fragile piece. In that moment, I sensed the beginning of something healing, not through rescue or pity, but through the simple choice to let others in. Family, I realized dimly, wasn't always born. It could be chosen, one shared fire at a time. The morning after that first shared fire dawned crisp and cold, the kind of winter light that pierced through the patched windows like a promise of harder days ahead. I stirred on my makeshift bedroll near the hearth, the embers still glowing faintly from the night before. My body ached from the long ride, but something felt different, less hollow. For a moment I lay there listening to the unfamiliar sounds, the soft scrape of a broom outside, the clatter of pots near the fire. No longer alone, in silence. I sat up, rubbing sleep from my eyes, and glanced around. The room looked even more transformed in daylight. The floorboards, though still warped, were free of the dust and debris I'd expected. A few crude shelves had been nailed to the walls, holding what looked like foraged herbs and a couple of clay bowls. The rabbit was still in its basket, contentedly munching on a carrot stub. And there, by the hearth, Aru was already at work, stirring something in a pot over the flames. The aroma hit me, earthy, spiced, like oats mixed with unfamiliar herbs that carried a hint of smoke and wildness. It wasn't the bland porridge I was used to, but it made my stomach rumble. Outside, through the open door, I saw Willa sweeping the small yard with a bundle of twigs tied into a broom. She moved with quiet efficiency, her braids swinging as she cleared away fallen leaves and debris that had piled up against the walls. The house's exterior was as run down as I'd feared, sagging roof, foundations settling unevenly into the earth, weeds choking the path, but seeing them tend to it already stirred something in me. They hadn't just squatted, they'd tried to make it livable. I stepped out, pulling on my coat against the chill. "Morning," I called, my voice gravelly from disuse. Willa paused, leaning on her broom, and offered a small nod. "Slept well?" Her accent was softer than Aru's, almost melodic despite the orcish growl underlying it. "Better than on the road," I admitted. Aru emerged from the doorway, wiping her hands on her tunic. "Food's ready. Not much, but it'll warm you." We ate at the rickety table inside, 3 bowls of the strange porridge, thick with nuts and dried berries they'd mustered from the forest. It was hearty, sticking to my ribs in a way that chased away the morning fog. As we ate, I took stock of the house properly. The roof leaked in at least 2 spots. I could see dark stains on the ceiling beams. The foundation had sunk on one side, making the floor tilt noticeably. The chimney needed cleaning, ash piled up in the hearth, threatening to choke the fire. Windows were makeshift at best, and the door barely latched. It was a fixer-upper in the truest sense, but with winter's bite already in the air, delays could mean disaster. I set my bowl down, meeting their eyes. "This place, it's mine by deed, but you've been here longer, you've cleaned it, fixed what you could, but it needs real work, roof, foundation, hearth. I came here to rebuild it, make it a home. Alone, it'll take months, and winter's coming fast." Aru crossed her arms, her expression guarded. "You want us gone?" "No," I said, surprising myself with how quickly the word came. "I want help. Stay if you will, but pull your weight. No pay, no masters, just us surviving together. If you choose to leave, the door's open, but if you stay, we fix this place as equals." They exchanged that sibling glance again, silent communication passing between them. Willa spoke first. "We've fixed worse. Aru knows stone and wood from clan builds. I can mend, cook, track what we need. We've got strong hands," Aru nodded. "Deal. Better than running." And just like that, the agreement was struck. No grand oaths, no papers, just a shared nod over empty bowls. We started that very day. I took stock of materials, a few tools from my saddlebags, a hammer, nails, saw, and what they'd gathered, sturdy branches for bracing, clay for patching cracks. Aru and I headed into the forest's edge for wood, her axe swinging with practiced ease as she felled saplings. She taught me to spot the straightest trunks, ones that wouldn't warp in the cold. "Human tools too fancy," she grunted as I struggled with my saw. "Orc way, 1 clean chop." We hauled the logs back, sweat freezing on our brows despite the labor. Willa, meanwhile, inventoried our supplies, dried meats, roots, a bit of flour, and set to mending the hides over the windows, her needle flashing in the light. By afternoon, we'd braced the sagging foundation. Aru lifted beams I could barely budge while I hammered supports into place. It was backbreaking, but there was a rhythm to it, a purpose that filled the void I'd carried for so long. Not everything went smoothly. A few days in, as we worked on the roof, a stubborn leak defied our patches. Rain dripped steadily onto the floor, pooling in the tilt. I cursed under my breath, frustration boiling over, memories of my failed shop flashing in my mind. "Damn this rot!" I snapped, tossing a sodden shingle aside. Aru, perched on the ladder, slammed her fist against a beam, letting out a string of orcish words that sounded like thunder rolling over rocks. I didn't understand them, but the tone was clear. Exasperation mixed with something fiercer. She caught my stare and barked a laugh. "Means stubborn as a mountain goat's ass. This house fights back." The absurdity hit me and I chuckled, the tension breaking like ice under sun. Willa, watching from below, smiled faintly, handing up more clay. "Laughing helps. In our village, we'd sing work songs to mock the hard parts." That evening around the fire, we shared more than just labor. Aru hummed an orcish chant, low and rhythmic, about warriors building halls against storms, while Willa stirred a pot of root stew. I told them about human festivals in Eldridge, the bonfires and dances that once lit up my winters. "Used to think those were what made a home," I said. "Now, maybe it's this." Willa looked up, her golden eyes thoughtful. "Pain of losing home. Does it ever fade? I paused, staring into the flames. It changes shape, but sharing it with others, it lightens. She nodded, and in that moment, I felt the first real threads of connection weaving us together. Not pity, but mutual understanding. As weeks turned to months, the house transformed. The roof held against snow. The foundation leveled. The hearth drew cleanly. We foraged together, Aru leading hunts for game, Willa spotting edible plants I'd never noticed. I taught them tricks for weatherproofing, human knots that held tighter than orc braids. Conflicts arose, Aru's impatience clashing with my caution, Willa's quiet withdrawing when memories hit hard. But we talked through them around the fire, building trust one conversation at a time. By midwinter, as blizzards howled outside, I realized I no longer felt alone. The house wasn't just shelter, it was becoming a haven forged not by one man's hands, but by 3 souls choosing to rebuild. The emptiness in my chest had begun to fill, not with what was lost, but with what we were creating together. As winter's grip finally loosened, the snow melted into rivulets that trickled down from the roof we'd so painstakingly repaired. The white forest awakened around us, buds unfurling on the trees, birdsong piercing the crisp air, and the ground softening underfoot, turning paths to mud. Our house, once a crumbling shell, now stood firm. The roof watertight, the foundation level, the hearth drawing cleanly without a puff of backdraft smoke. It wasn't perfect. Scars from the old neglect still showed in uneven walls and patched floors, but it was ours, built by hands that had started as strangers. With the thaw came opportunity. I dusted off my old skills as a house restorer, hanging a simple sign by the path: repairs for all, human or orc. It was a bold move in these borderlands where old prejudices simmered like embers under ash. Humans whispered about orc savages, and orcs eyed human settlements with wary distrust from past raids. But word spread slowly. First, a farmer needing a barn braced against spring floods, then a traveler with a wagon axle snapped. Aru proved invaluable as my partner. Her strength turned heavy lifting into child's play, and her knowledge of stonework, honed in her clan's mountain builds, made her a natural at reinforcing foundations. She'd heft boulders I could barely roll, setting them with precision that left clients gaping. Willa, meanwhile, turned her talents to something unexpected. Her cooking, once just survival fare for us, became a draw. She experimented with forest herbs and orc spices she'd salvaged from their travels, bitterroot for depth, wild garlic for bite, and soon locals trickled in for a bowl of her stew. Best orc soup in the region, one grizzled hunter grumbled after his second helping, dropping a few coppers despite his initial scowl. She handled the tallying too, her quick mind keeping track of trades and barters when coin was scarce. It wasn't a booming business, but it sustained us. Repairs brought in tools and materials, meals fostered goodwill. Amid this budding routine, something quieter bloomed between Willa and me. It wasn't the fiery passion of youth I'd heard in tavern songs, no dramatic declarations under starlit skies. It was subtler, built on shared glances and small comforts. I'd return from a job, mud-caked and weary, and find her folding linens at the table, her braid catching the afternoon light. The sight of her, methodical, serene, eased the knots in my chest like nothing else. She'd smile faintly when I recounted a client's odd request, her laughter soft but genuine, pulling stories from me I hadn't shared in years. In those moments, the house felt truly alive, not just repaired, but inhabited. Aru noticed it first, of course. One evening, as we hauled in firewood from the forest's edge, she clapped a hand on my shoulder, her grip firm enough to jolt me. "You're staring again, human," she said with a wry grin, her tusks flashing. At Willa, like a pup with a new bone. I flushed, stacking logs to hide it. It's nothing, just glad we're all here." She snorted, hefting a bundle twice my size. "Nothing? You've been different since the snows, lighter, but if you cling to your ghosts forever, you'll miss what's right in front of you." Her golden eyes met mine, serious now. We orcs say, hold the past like a blade, sharp for lessons, but don't grip so tight it cuts you. Her words lingered like smoke. That night, as the 3 of us cleared the table after a meal of Willa's venison stew, tender from slow cooking over our reliable hearth, I felt a pull I couldn't ignore. Aru excused herself early, muttering about checking traps, and closed the door with a knowing wink. Willa and I were alone in the warm glow, washing bowls in the basin. The rhythm was familiar. Her hands deft, mine slower but steady. But tonight, my heart hammered like it hadn't since my younger days. I set a bowl down, water dripping from my fingers. "Willa," I said, my voice low. She turned, wiping her hands on her apron, her expression curious. "If I said, 'I like having you here, more than just for the help,' would you laugh?" She didn't laugh. Instead, her amber eyes softened, searching mine. The firelight danced across her green-gray skin, highlighting the faint scars on her arms, marks of her own battles. "Why would I laugh?" she replied softly. "You've given us a home when no one else would, and, I like being here too, with you. As long as you don't send me away, I'll stay, maybe forever." The words hung between us, simple yet profound. I stepped closer, bridging the space that had once felt vast due to our differences, her height, her strength, the cultural chasms between human and orc. But in that moment, none of it mattered. I reached for her hand, her fingers enveloping mine, warm and calloused from work. "I won't send you away," I whispered. Us. It's what I've been missing." She leaned down slightly, our foreheads touching in a gesture that felt both foreign and right. No grand embrace, no rush of heat, just a quiet acknowledgement of shared healing. We'd both lost so much, families, homes, pieces of ourselves. Loving again wasn't about erasing that, it was about daring to build atop the ruins. We stood there, the fire crackling, until Aru returned, her boots thumping outside. She poked her head in, smirking. "About time," she muttered, closing the door behind her. From then on, we lived as a family. Not by blood, but by choice. Aru teased us mercilessly, but her protectiveness shone through like when a villager grumbled about orcs in our midst during a repair job. "Mind your tongue," she'd growl, her axe at her side a silent warning, while Willa diffused with a free bowl of soup. We faced those small conflicts together, whispers in the market, wary glances from travelers. But our work spoke louder, houses mended, meals shared, and gradually acceptance grew. We divided chores without words. I tend the garden as spring bloomed, Aru hunted for the table, Willa managed our growing larder. Evenings became rituals of stories and songs, orc chants blending with human tales, healing wounds we hadn't realized were still open. In those months, I understood. This wasn't rescue. I hadn't saved them, nor they me. We'd built something mutual, a family forged in labor and laughter, proving that after loss, love was the bravest step forward. A year had passed since that smoke-filled hook that drew me into this unexpected life, and our home had become something I scarcely recognized from the deed's faded ink. The seasons had cycled fully, winter's bite giving way to spring's bloom, summer's heat, and autumn's harvest, and with them we'd woven ourselves into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. We lived as a true family now, not by accident or necessity, but by the quiet choices we made each day. No blood tied us, yet the bonds were unbreakable, forged in shared sweat and laughter. Mornings began with the clatter of pots as Willa stoked the hearth, brewing her herbal teas that blended orc roots with human grains. Aru would be out early, tending the small garden we'd expanded behind the house, rows of hardy vegetables she'd insisted on planting orc-style, deep in the soil to withstand frost. I'd join them after checking the traps or mending tools, our hands moving in sync, one lighting the fire, another chopping wood, the third feeding the animals we'd accumulated. A couple of goats bartered from a neighbor, chickens scratching in a coop Aru built, and that ever-present rabbit, now plump and lazy in its expanded pen. The house itself had grown too. We'd added a lean-to for storage, expanded the main room with timber from the forest, and even built a larger table to accommodate the visitors who now found their way to our door. It had become a waypoint for the weary. Human travelers caught in storms seeking shelter and a hot meal. Orc wanderers, displaced by clan disputes up north, sharing stories around our fire before moving on. Willa taught me phrases in Orcish, simple greetings like Kragthar for welcome or Veshka for thanks, while Aru brewed batches of her clan's malt wine, a potent, earthy drink that warmed bones and loosened tongues. Evenings often filled with these guests, their tales mingling with ours, turning our once isolated haven into a quiet hub of the borderlands. One crisp autumn afternoon, I sat on the porch steps, hammer idle in my lap as I watched the leaves drift down. The house stood proud now, roof straight, walls sealed against the wind, a fresh coat of whitewash gleaming in the sun. Memories flooded me. The first leak we'd patched together, the night Aru cursed the stubborn beams, Willa's soft songs during long repairs. It wasn't just stone and wood anymore, it was a testament to what we'd built from ruin. Willa joined me, settling beside me with a woven basket of mended clothes. Her presence was a comfort I'd come to crave. The way her shoulder brushed mine, her quiet strength anchoring my wandering thoughts. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a simple leather cord, threaded with a small, shimmering green stone. It was worn smooth, etched with faint, orcish runes. "This was Mother's," she said softly, placing it in my palm. "In our clan, holding this means carrying the tribe's spirit. I choose to leave it here, with you." I closed my fingers around it, the stone warm from her touch. "Willa, I don't know if I deserve—" "You do," she interrupted gently, her golden eyes meeting mine. "You've given us more than shelter, a life, a choice." Aru emerged from the garden then, wiping dirt from her hands, her grin knowing as she caught the moment. "Softening him up, sister," she teased, but her tone held warmth. She'd changed too. Less guarded, more at ease in this blended world. Not long after, she announced her own news, a courtship with a local blacksmith, a sturdy human named Thorn, who'd admired her work on a neighbor's forge. "He's got fire in him," she said with a wink. "We'll build near the stream, close enough to visit, far enough for privacy." Her wedding was simple, held in our yard with a mix of human and orc traditions, rings exchanged under a canopy of woven branches, toasts with her malt wine. Watching her go, arm in arm with Thorn, filled me with a bittersweet pride. Our family was expanding, not fracturing. Inspired, I turned my thoughts to Willa. In the quiet of our room one night, as rain pattered on the roof, I presented her with a copper ring I'd forged myself, simple, etched with intertwined human and orc symbols. "Will you stay with me?" I asked, my voice steady despite the racing heart. "Not just as family, but as more?" She slipped it on, her larger hand enveloping mine. "I already have," she whispered. We didn't rush into ceremonies. Our bond was private, deepened by the healing we'd shared. Soon we expanded the house further, a bigger bedroom, space for what might come. Children, perhaps blending our worlds in ways the borderlands had never seen. As the year turned again toward winter, I stood with Willa on the porch, watching a distant traveler approach, a lone orc, cloak tattered, seeking refuge. "One day," I said, squeezing her hand, "more like him will come. Lost souls, like we were. Remember, don't close the door." She nodded, her smile soft. "We won't. That's how we found each other." In that life we'd crafted, I saw the truths that had eluded me in grief. Compassion had altered our fates, turning strangers into saviors. Family wasn't blood. It was the deliberate choice to open your world to others. Healing came not from heroic rescues, but from the daily grind of building together brick by brick, word by word. And loving after loss, that was the truest courage of adulthood, daring to risk your mended heart on something new, knowing it might break again, but trusting it would mend stronger. Our home stood open, a beacon in the forest's edge, ready for whoever fate sent next. And in its warmth, I finally felt whole.